So you wanna be a picture book writer, then you gotta write picture books. And you're gonna need a bucket load of bright ideas for titles, plots, and hooks. If you're partial to prose or you're raring to rhyme, then repeat after me, it's a challenge, but I'm gonna tackle each story 1 month at a time with 12 by 12.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 12 by 12 Picture Book Podcast. I am picture book author and founder of 12 by 12, Julie Headland, and I'm here today with co-host Kelly Panique, and we are talking to Valerie Bolling, award-winning author, educator, and I have to read my favorite part of her bio from her website, which I think encapsulates Valerie so well. Reader, writer, thinker, fighter, traveler, walker, listener, talker, teacher, learner, blessings, yearner. And I promise you, if you go and read all of Valerie's books, which I have, except the chapter books, just because I don't read chapter books. If you have that list next to you and you go through her books, you will find every one of those things in her books. And so she is also a longtime member of 12 by 12. She is on our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and one of our co-leaders of the Black Affinity Group in 12 by 12. So, with that, I want to launch right into our conversation. We are at the very beginning of Black History Month, and one thing I noticed lately about your body of work is that your first books were, I guess, what I would consider joyful, jaunty, rhyme, mostly concept books, although there was some story embedded in there. Like we had your debut was Let's Dance, and it was about different kinds of dances all over the world. And we had Bing Bop Jam, or wait, did I get that right?
Bing bop bam, time to
Time to
jam.
Jam. I knew Jam was in there. Together We Swim, Together We Ride, about biking and swimming and all, and so on. But your three most recent picture books are quite different. You co wrote I See Color, an affirmation and celebration of our diverse world. You co wrote that with Kaylee Pugh. And then the book that came out this year is a picture book biography called A Flea for Justice. Marian Wright Edelman stands up for change. And you have one that just came out last month, January 20th, correct? Uh,
Correct.
a March for Hope. And so those three are, first of all, prose. Secondly, thematically about diversity and social justice and so forth, and more about cultural experience. And I'm wondering if that was an intended shift, or you just that's just what you happened to write about right now.
Yeah, that's a great question. It was intentional, and it was intentional first because I was looking at the first books that I was fortunate to have had published. And as you said, they're fun, they're joyful, they're get up and move, they're written in sparse rhyming text. But I feel if you want to have a career in this industry, you need to continue to reinvent yourself, to write differently. And so I was looking at those books, and while I enjoyed writing them, I enjoy reading them, I like to think that children and adults enjoy them as well, but I didn't want those to be the only types of books I wrote. So I looked and I said, okay, they all rhyme. I don't have to always rhyme, so I can write something in prose. These books really fall under fiction, or I know they were looking at Let's Dance as more informational text, but I was thinking I'd like to write nonfiction. And so I See Color and A Flea for Justice are nonfiction, but even they are different because while they both are biographies, I would say, well, A Flea for Justice is a biography because it's about one person. It's about Marion Wright Edelman, who founded the Children's Defense Fund, who was the first Black female lawyer in Mississippi. If you don't know about her and her story, you definitely should know about her. She is still alive. She's 86 years old. And I See Color, on the other hand, is a bit more of a concept book, but because it doesn't delve deeply into biography of certainly of not one individual, but it's individuals and groups, but it's a very light touch, I would say. It's more of an invitation. There's one sentence about the person or people, and then there's back matter at the end, which invites you to delve deeper and to learn more. Because the main purpose of that book is really centered around the phrase, I don't see color. And so that's why Kaylee and I actually describe people by the color of their skin and mention the act of social justice that they performed and what they contributed to in our country to make it a better place, a place that is truly for all as it should be. And then the March for Hope actually was a story I wrote very early on, but because I wrote it in 2017 after having attended the Women's March of 2017, but it wasn't ready to be published at that time until later. I knew there was more that I wanted to do with it. I needed to find the right kind of story to center it in, or to center it around, and so that's where I developed the character of Hope, and which of course has double meaning. And so yeah, and so that one is not nonfiction, it's historical fiction. It's interesting to think of historical fiction being 2017, and it's also interesting to think about that book in the context of today's world now. But yeah, so I just really, I like writing differently. I like challenging myself to write different types of stories. And while children, and particularly children of color, BIPOC children, Black and Brown children, need to see themselves in the stories like the ones that I first wrote, doing things that all children do and just having fun. And white kids need to see them as well in those stories, doing things that they do. But there's another side, and I do feel a responsibility to share those stories as well. I don't, want everything just to be light and fun. There should be that, and children need that, and they deserve that, and everything shouldn't be traumatic or horrible or, things like that. But these three books that I have most recently written, they're educational, but they aren't books, and they're great for discussion, but they're not books that are weighted down in sort of a heaviness, but they're not the lightness of the first set of books.
Yeah. So I'm going to pull a couple of threads there because you said some things that both resonate with me and also that I thought were really interesting. One thing is that you said that you didn't want to write the same kind of book and you wanted to challenge yourself to write differently. And I feel that with my whole heart as somebody who has written in rhyme, funny, humorous wordplay, picture book biography, and so on. I feel like for sure, you're a woman after my own heart in that regard. But some conventional wisdom, some people hear or receive advice
Mhm.
that you should brand yourself as an author, as writing a particular kind of book. And obviously that is not something that, even if I agreed that that's the way you should go, I couldn't do it. But what's interesting is that you resisted being branded in a certain way, and it goes against some of the conventional wisdom that newer authors might hear and try to achieve. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not an expert on it, Julie and Kelly, but I do, I don't think, I think there are some things as authors, as illustrators, as creators, we really need to think about and we need to concern ourselves with. And then there are some others that we hear people talk about, but I'm not sure that those things really need to be our focus. For instance, branding oneself. I'm just not sure. But if I were to be branded, I would hope I'd be branded as someone who has written books for children that they enjoy and that children can see themselves in these books, regardless of their background, and that they would hopefully learn something from my books. You know, that's the educator in me. So even in Let's Dance, to learn about dances from around the world, or to learn that yes, you can get up and dance, or you can dance in your chair when they see a character in a wheelchair. There's learning there. To learn and together we swim, we're not only learning about swimming, but Kaylani has done such a beautiful job of showing who else is at poolside. And so if you look through the book, I won't tell you, you need to look at the illustrations and notice who else is either, there's a scene where you see three different people sort of standing or walking by the pool. You also see them in the pool. And so there are things like that to learn just as, and to discuss just as much as there is to learn and discuss Marion Wright Edelman's life and her journey and all that she contributed, as well as the many people mentioned in Icy Color.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned the role of illustrators in not just, as Jane Yolen would say, decorating the words that you've written, but actually adding very important layers
Yes.
to the story.
Hmm.
And I do have Together We Swim, and I'm so tempted to go pull it off the shelf now, but I will wait. I will wait.
Yeah.
I'll do that afterward. I'm going to ask one more question about what you just said, and then I know Kelly has some about 12 by 12, but I'm curious. So my first published books are in rhyme. I wrote
Hmm.
them in rhyme.
Yep.
So I am another person who enjoys writing both in rhyme and in prose. But speaking of challenges, it was actually a challenge for me. I had to train myself to write in prose because I was
Interesting.
so embedded
Mm.
in rhyme, and it took me a while to write with economy and with beauty and the story, all those things, that you need in every book, which is kind of funny because it's now like we know it's notoriously difficult to write well in rhyme and do all those
Yeah,
things.
right.
But
Yes.
that actually came more naturally to me initially. And I'm wondering if A, you had a similar experience. And the second part of the question is, now that I have written so many things in prose,
Mm,
it's more of a challenge to go back to rhyme. So I
that's
force
interesting.
myself to, because at the end of the day, a story has to be meant to be in rhyme. Now, lots of
Yes.
people just rhyme everything,
Yes.
but not every story. In fact, most stories are not really well suited to rhyme. So
That's
you have to
true.
choose the ones that you think are suited for
Hmm.
rhyme because it's fun, sometimes humor or musical or, you know, what have you. So I will force myself to pick something that I think should be in rhyme and and work on it because now that's harder for me. And anyway, I thought that was interesting that you had the same, like, here's a block of books that were
Hmm.
written in rhyme,
Yep, right.
here's a block of books that are written in prose. Did you have difficulty switching?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I did because of what you said, Julie. There are certain books that are meant to be written in rhyme and that call to you to be written in rhyme. So, certainly a book like Let's Dance, like, how could I not write that in rhyme? Tappity tap, fingers snap, turn, twirl, twist, whirl. It begs to be written in rhyme. But a story like which I told you, I also wrote The March for Hope in early draft in 2017, horrible draft. And there's something else I'll tell you about that draft, but that never came to me as a rhyming story. It didn't make sense to write a story like that as a rhyme. But I am going to give a little aside here because I do think most 12 by 12 members probably know this, but if you're new to 12 by 12 or just starting out writing, like this is your goal at the beginning of 2026 to get started, you may not know what I'm about to tell you. So, I did not get the best advice on this story when I started out. Why? Because I was taking a class. Now, it is good to take a class, but this was a class that there were four of us. I was the only picture book writer. There were two middle grade writers and one young adult writer. And the instructor herself was a middle grade writer. And so I was getting advice like, oh, you have to really describe the setting. You have to spend time on that. You have to really tell us about the character. We have to really know. There was a lot. And I didn't know it was advice that didn't
Right.
make sense to what I was writing because I wanted to write a picture book. So I was so confused and it wasn't going where it needed to go. And it was getting longer and longer. And I knew, wait, I had heard along the way at some point, picture books weren't supposed to be the length that this book was at that time. So I shelved it for a while. And then when I learned more and I knew more and the story was still there, then I came back to it. So I think it's important. I encourage people take classes, certainly have critique groups, but I always say you should be in spaces and getting advice from those who are writing and studying the genre in which you are. Otherwise, if you're in a group with playwrights, that is not going to be beneficial to you. So, and that doesn't mean that if you have a very close friend or you want to share something with your spouse or your child or your grandchild or whomever, yes, you can share it, but know that and sometimes you can get an emotional reaction and you'll know, or if it's something humorous, you might be able to see where people laugh. But in terms of getting the critique that you really need to move your story forward and to create a story that is publishable, if that's your goal, you really need to be with those who are writing the same genre. And notice I said earlier, not just writing, but studying. So that means reading books and not just reading books to children for pleasure, but reading and studying and analyzing those books.
Yeah. And I think that's an excellent segue, Kelly, into
Yes. Um, One of the places you can learn about picture books is 12 by 12. And Valerie, you've been a long time member of 12 by 12. You come back year after year. And on top of that, you're also a member of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And you've been so helpful in helping us steer that committee, and we really appreciate that. And you're also a moderator of our Black Affinity group, like Julie mentioned. And I just wonder if you could tell us why it's so important for you to keep coming back to 12 by 12, and what motivates you to give back in this way, because it's not like you just show up and you're in 12 by 12. Like you're really in it, and you're
Yes,
you're
I
really
am.
participating and giving back. And I just wonder, what motivates you to do that, and if you could tell us a little bit more.
Sure. So I'll start with that last question first about what motivates me, Kelly. And then, of course, I'll talk about why 12 by 12 is just so important, and that if you're not already a member, there's still time for you to join, and you should. But in terms of what motivates me to continue to be involved, it is, first of all, the community. The 12 by 12 community is just so wonderful. And I think I'm hoping you can even hear the vibe in this podcast between Julie and Kelly and myself. But it's so important to give back. There were people who helped me at the beginning of my writing journey and who still help me. And so this is something I can do to give back. And if I can help people in any way, if I'm able to give advice, if I'm able to have people learn from my experiences and my mistakes, as I just shared with you, being in this class for, I think it was writing for young children. I mean, there's a big difference between, board book, picture book, chapter, early reader, chapter book. We have all these genres, middle grade, young adult. I don't think we should all be in the same class together. So that's what motivates me. I want to give what I can to people, and I want them to be able to get their stories, to tell their stories, and to get them published if that's what they want. Now, in terms of why you should join 12 by 12, and 12 by 12 has so many offerings. For instance, this podcast is new this year. So, Julie, I talked about earlier about how I like to continue to reinvent myself as a writer. And I will just give a little plug here. It's not 12 by 12 specific, but I am also writing books for teachers now. And I'm simultaneously working on books 2 and 3. Book 1 was published in June of 2025, and I have a book slated for this year and one for next year as well in 2027. But anyway, Julie is always reinventing herself, and right along with Kelly, they're always doing new things. So there's always something new to look forward to. Some people, I will say, I'm going to be honest with you, what's the negative about 12 by 12? The negative is actually a positive. It's that there are so many wonderful things. It's like going to a buffet and wanting to eat everything, and you can't possibly eat everything. So you sort of choose a direction, like, am I going to have this type of food or that type of food? And so I tell people, think about 2, maybe 3, but 2 things that you want to get out of your membership each year. And the longer you're in 12 by 12, you can add to that. So if the first year, the only thing you do is say, I'm going to use this to motivate me to write, if you do that, that's fabulous. I would say there is one other thing you should do too. So that's why there should be at least 2 things a year, because you need to access the webinars. Attend live when you can, because you'll feel that sense of community, even with people communicating in the chat, and you'll get to ask questions. But if you are not able to attend live, make sure you write on your calendar a time when you know you have some time to view the webinar. So
That's
even if
excellent
those are the
advice.
2 things you do, is write and view the webinar, fabulous. So then I'm just going to say a couple of other things. So for pre-published authors and illustrators, well, really, this is more for pre-published authors, I think. I would go to the critique corner. Critique partners have been found there, and critique groups have been made. But you can get feedback, and you can also provide feedback on other stories. And There is a pitch corner as well where you can get feedback on your pitches, because if you are querying or about to query, you need to have a really sharp pitch. So those two I would probably really point out to pre-published authors. For those of us who are published, it is so, again, the community is so wonderful. There's a place where you can post just the title of your upcoming book and ask for reviews. And you have members who are willing to give you reviews, and you also get badges for reviews. Well, I'm not going to get into badges now because that you'll have to find out what badges are, but you can get badges for reviewing members' books, and you can request that members request your book, your upcoming book, upcoming titles at their library. So those are two things at the beginning of the year. I always like to go into those sections of the forum and list my upcoming books so that I can get reviews and library requests. And then the last thing I'll mention, because this is for everyone, there is a wonderful book discussion group held by Michelle Cusalito. And she chairs that, she facilitates that. It's not an in-person or Zoom meeting, but the discussion is just as rich in writing. And I participated in the first one last year. I wasn't able to do the others, but I enjoyed the one that I did very much. And it's usually, it's a craft book. It's a book that the group decides on. So you are definitely going to get something out of that book. So those are some things you can think about. And there's even more.
We swear we did not pay her to say all of that, but
No.
I'm so, it means so much to hear you speak about the ways in which you still use and find value in 12 by 12.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we do pride ourselves on is we believe very strongly that you need to be a lifelong learner.
Absolutely.
If you want to have longevity in this
Yes.
career. And so this is a nice way to circle back to how you started, which is you don't want to be in one place. You don't want to write one kind of book and one kind of style. And I think that is also true for us in terms of 12 by 12, is that we're looking always at where our members are and what they need. And we know that there's a range because some people are just coming in at the very beginning, and some people like you have multiple books published and have won awards. And so it really is special, I think, in that regard. But I want to I want to say one thing about A March for Hope, and then we'll move to our final questions. It's so hard doing these because I want to just talk and talk and talk.
Yes.
But
yes.
we don't want to make this a 2-hour episode, but
Because it could be.
because
Easily.
easily. And that would be if we were disciplined.
Right.
So
Yes.
it requires even more discipline. Okay. But one thing I noticed right away when I read A March for Hope was it's so layered, because you have the aspect of sisterhood and womanhood and being a girl and all that's wrapped up in that, plus being a little bit shy, a little bit uncertain, not really wanting to use your voice or not really knowing you can. But then the intersectionality also of this being a Black girl, thinking about her ancestors and so on. But even more than that, and for me personally, I will add that all these different ways to come at a book. You may recall that there was a book published about the Women's March pretty shortly after it happened.
Yes.
And there was a lot of hubbub about it because it was written by a man. And listen, we love men. Um, we do. And many of them are fabulous writers and or illustrators. But there was a definite emotional reaction to the idea that the first book, the first major book that would get published about the Women's March was written by a man. And so I love that it was so clear to me from the beginning when I read it that, ah,
Mhm.
here's the book we've been waiting for,
Oh,
you know,
thank
Oh,
you.
here's the book.
Wow.
And so I will certainly be evangelizing it both
Oh, thank you.
for Black History Month, but also Women's History Month. And this should be the book, the Women's March book. So there
Wow.
you go.
Wow,
And
Julie. Thank
speak,
that. Wow. I'm truly touched because obviously with the book having just come out, there hasn't been, people haven't had time, everyone hasn't read it or had time to react to it. So to hear that and to hear that you got everything in the book that I was trying to do and to bring it back to the educator part of me, this is a book that gives a lot of, I hope, um, a lot of space for discussion. And I think a lot of books provide that. And the children are always ready to have the discussions. It's are the adults, are the
right.
parents and caregivers, are the teachers, so I hope that this book will make its way into classrooms and that it will spark a number of discussions.
yeah. So with mentioning Black History Month, we are at the beginning. And do you have books that you would recommend to our listeners for this period of time? And I don't want to say just Black History Month because we should be reading these books all the time. But so I should just say books that you would recommend that are particularly relevant for Black History Month but should be read at any time of the year.
Absolutely. And because I think you see about me, I like to do things in categories. Like my first books are rhyming and sparse text, and the next books are more social justice and prose. And even the way I talked about 12 by 12, this is for pre-published, this
Mm.
is for published. So I sort of was, this is one of the questions in fairness. That Julie did provide in advance. So I was able to think about it. And Julie, though you did not say, will you select books by Black creators? I naturally did that because whenever I have the opportunity to shout out Black creators, I that is something that is very important to me and I want to do. So, category one is debut authors from 2025.
Woo!
So, because these are book, I mean, we're newly into 2026, so I haven't read, some of my friends who are debuting this year, their books aren't out yet. I haven't read them yet, but the two that I'll mention from 2025 are Pam Courtney, A Season for Fishin', and that book is illustrated by Tony Chambers. And then my other good friend, Stephanie Foster Brown, My Heart Speaks Criollo, and that is illustrated by Keisha Morris. So I suggest both of those books, and they're very closely connected to the cultures of those two authors. So Pam lives in rural Louisiana, and so it's about, they go fishing and they have a fish fry. And Stephanie's book is based on her Cabo Verdean heritage and about her relationship with her grandfather. So those two are my shout outs to those debut authors from last year. And then the authors who I would say, have had started, I would say, a few years ago, but they've had some other books out. And in 2025, I have to mention my good buddy. He's also my agent, sibling, and a critique partner, Malcolm Newsome. He and Janine Muhammad created the book Daddy Daughter Dance, which is just so precious. And Malcolm he has three sons and he has two daughters, and the daughters are the youngest. And it's just, yeah, it's a beautiful book. And I'm hoping he and I can team up to do something with Let's Dance and Daddy Daughter Dance. And the illustrations are just so cute. And then Tonya Abari wrote the 6888, and Lance Evans illustrated that. And that is definitely a book for this month because it's about a women's battalion in World War II.
Mm.
So that is one absolutely, particularly for the history. It's a history that we don't often talk about or know about. So that's who I would mention there. And then my two good buddies who've been writing much longer than I have and have so many books out. Tamika Fryer Brown, and I know she's done a webinar for 12 by 12 before. She has a book out, and these two actually I'm mentioning are 2026 books. So Prayer Is, and that is illustrated by Eliana Harris. And then Kelly Starling Lyons, who's my mentor, sister, friend. Kelly is just amazing, and she has just been so helpful to me throughout my career. As I said, we were connected because she was my We Need Diverse Books mentor, and now she's
Oh,
become a
wow.
dear friend. And this year, she has a book called Writing Magic, which is illustrated by the famous E.B. Lewis. So those are the books that I would recommend.
Oh, that's awesome. I have to tell you, I met Malcolm at NCTE,
Oh,
and I actually had lunch with him and James, your agent, James
yeah.
McGowan, and Michelle Cusolito. And I had never met Malcolm before, and we all just kind of happened in the same place, and he was absolutely delightful. He was
Yep,
there with
that's
his
him.
wife, and he was just delightful.
Yep.
Okay, now we go to the most fun question, which is, at least to me, what is a book that you didn't write but that you wish you had written, and why?
Yes. And the book that always immediately comes to mind, and whenever I can plug this book, I plug this book. And it is by Tamika Fryer Brown and illustrated by Nicholas Smith, who describes himself as an artivist, an art activist. And it's That Flag. And the reason I have to pick that book, it is, first of all, I'm so fortunate that I got to see early drafts of it and weigh in on it. So, I feel especially connected to it for that reason. But it is just so clever. It is, I mean, talk about rich discussion to have. This is also a book, actually, I just thought of this off the top of my head. This would be a good one to pair with the March for Hope. Um, but it's just the fact that it's these, two girls, one white, one black, experiencing the same things but having a different reaction based on their families. And there's a page that I've recommended this book to my husband who teaches high school history. And even recently, like last week or the week before, he said, "Oh yes, I'm doing a lesson tomorrow on the media and how, the media, whatever, there are different sides and how the media portrays certain things." And I said, "Sheldon, you need to take this book into school and you need to open up to this page, or this spread, because there is a spread, and I don't know if this was Nicholas's idea, or if it was through an editor or art direction. Maybe it was even Tamika's idea and it was an illustration note. I'm not sure. But it is so perfect because an incident has occurred in the community, and you see the Black character and her family watching the news, and the white character and her family watching the news, and they're clearly watching the same story but getting different news, a different reaction to it.
Wow.
And it's just amazing. And it's also, we often talk about
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
in a picture book or in a story, things have to come to resolution. We have to close it up. We have to know what happens at the end. And it's very rare in a children's book that it's not tied up in a nice, neat bow. And in this one, it's not tied up in a nice, neat bow, kind of like Jackie Woodson's Each Kindness, that sometimes we don't know how the story is going to end. We just don't. And it is just it's an amazing book. It's in a book that has received some distinction, in my opinion, not nearly as much as it should have. This book should have been just like at the top of every list and winning all sorts of awards. It's amazing. I'm so thrilled for Tamika for having written it and Nick for having illustrated it. And I just wish I'd been the one to have written it. But since I didn't, I'm gonna talk about it and cheer it on every chance I get.
I own that book and it is a masterpiece. And yes, we did have Tamika as a webinar speaker a couple of years ago. Speaking of somebody who refuses branding, going from like 12 dinging doorbells
Yeah.
Yeah.
to that flag. So with that, you have also given a webinar for 12 by 12. You talked about tension. Your webinar was about creating tension in picture books. And so we are going to offer for our listeners a 25% discount on that webinar. You go to 12by12challenge.com/Valerie, and you will get 25% off her excellent webinar on tension in picture books. And because you mentioned Tamika, we're going to
Oh,
add
great.
a
Yay.
25% discount on Tamika's webinar too. So if you go to 12by12challenge.com/Tamika, you will get her webinar for 25% off. And last but certainly not least, if you're listening to this on the day it airs, you have 10 days left to join 12 by 12 in 2026. We would love to have you. We want to have you part of our community and part of the discussion and part of the learning. You can go to 12by12challenge.com/membership, and all of the information you need is there. And I
Let's
think
just be clear that that the last day of registration is February 15th, 2026. So if you don't know what day this webinar came out, the day that we end registration is February 15th, 2026. And if you don't make it in that day, go to that membership page, sign up for our newsletter, because then you will hear about all of the free events and things that take place outside of 12 by 12, and you will hear when we open 2027. And of course, if you're listening to this later in 2026, we don't want you to miss 2027. So be sure to do that. 12by12challenge.com/membership.
yes.
Yes, and
Thank
don't
you.
miss out. If you're listening and you're able to sign up for 2026, do it now. If you are hearing this after registration, put a note on your calendar for next year to make sure you have between January 1st and February 15th, 2027 to sign up. And as Kelly said, this is how wonderful the community is. Even if you're not a member, there are still some perks and webinars that you will be able to take advantage of.
That's right. Thank you, Kelly, for keeping me organized as always.
That's what I do. That's what I do.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And
Thank you, Valerie. This was
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank
It was
you. It was
lovely to have
wonderful to
you.
be
Oh, I
here.
almost forgot to mention, I mean, you know this, but you are our very first author interview for the podcast. So this
Oh,
is a really special one for us too. So thank you very much.
thank you.
All right.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thanks for
Bye.
listening.
Do it together so never you fear. It's a handy little way to help you kick into gear. You're amazing, exciting. Look out, cause you're writing 12 by 12. 12 manuscripts. 12 by 12. 12 picture books. 12 by 12.